Let's talk all about AI in business. It's hosted by Brent Muller. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Future Proof, the podcast where we're talking with leaders in the mid-market space around the impact of AI and how they're changing the business landscape in general. And before we jump into today's episode, for everybody that's out there that watches, as we always say, what we do here at Deploy AI is we focus on the growth aspect in the mid-market for founders, leaders, and execs. We build solutions for founders and growth teams in the B2B and SaaS industry. So if you just want to have a 15-minute conversation about what we do and how this might help you, we're happy anytime. There's links in the show notes. But let's jump into today's episode with Elizabeth Anderson from Lunar Lab. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So we always start with what I call the leader's journey. So tell us about your background leading up to being co-founder of Lunar Lab.
Yeah, so I have a little bit different background than most people in the tech industry. I am from a very rural small town in Alabama. I grew up below the poverty line, so had a really difficult early life. Ended up going to school for music because I was able to get a full scholarship to the university.
I see the piano in the background, so yes.
Yeah, there's a piano. I've even got a little theremin over there if anybody knows about electronic music instruments.
Very cool.
Which was actually kind of one of the ways that I found myself getting into tech was through electronic music. That involves a lot of coding. And of course, I did B2B website design and development when I was in college to kind of pay my way. Ended up getting into banking right after I graduated from college because, as you may imagine, there are not a ton of jobs in the music theory space. So ended up getting into banking. Banking, it was like 2008. So not a great time to be in the banking industry.
Right.
Then went into FinTech.
That was right at the crash.
I was employed at the largest bank failure of 2009. So that was a wild ride. Got into FinTech after that. So did, enterprise level FinTech products. So, my clients were some of the biggest financial companies in the entire world. Went from that into custom software development. I did that for years and years and years. I think the inside joke at our company is that I've done every job in tech except for literally write code. And I have actually written code before. So I've kind of done it all. I got into custom software development and then we launched our company. So my co-founder and I, we were kind of at a state where, we're both women and the tech industry has a major problem with women at senior levels in their career leaving the tech industry. And we said, well, there are some major problems in this industry, but why don't we stay and make it better? So why don't we create what we want the tech industry to be? And so the rest is history, as they say. We've been really happy since we launched on our own. I think one of the best things about my company is that we have a really great company culture here. So there's no manufactured emergencies. Most of the tech companies that I've worked for have been, a lot of them have been very toxic, and we don't have any of that here. We're just, we just come into work and have a good time and help our people.
I love it. So talk to us about Lunar Lab and kind of your vision for it, right? Obviously you wanted to make, the tech industry better, brighter, and more positive, right? For sure. But Tell us about your vision and then kind of your outlook for growing Lunar Lab.
Yeah. So what we do here is UX design, product strategy, AI strategy, project management, and then user research and validation. The reason that we sort of launched the way that we did with our company, like I said, we do not do development in-house here. We work with external developers. But the reason that we launched the way that we did was because we had consistently seen in the tech industry a lot of situations where software was being built and it was failing for really preventable reasons, right? So you were building anywhere from $20,000 software projects up to $2 million software projects. And a lot of times a significant number of those fail. And it's because they don't have a good strategy behind them. There's no thought to monetization. There's no thought to user validation. How is this going to work in the marketplace? Do people actually want this? One of the things that we joke around about is like, who asked for this? right? Like, because so often people are building stuff that nobody is going to use, and they're not necessarily thinking about the user experience piece of it. The other thing is that often these products they're not intuitive, they're very difficult to use. They're just not really matching people's goals or even the business goals. And we kind of got tired of watching that happen to people over and over again. One of the cases that we saw happen was where a guy spent his entire life savings on a product that went nowhere. And we did not personally work on that product. We ended up kind of getting to a point where we were saying no to a lot of stuff that we didn't feel, ethically that we could work on. And so we wanted to do something different. And we wanted to be the type of company that could actually help people, that could say, okay, you're bringing this stuff in, but like, let's talk about it. We often say that we're not like design transcription service. It's not like our clients come to us and say, build this, and then we build that. It's
Right.
more, a consultative approach where we're saying, okay, what are you trying to build? Who is this for? What is in the market today? How are people solving this problem? How can we make this really intuitive? But also, because we're a certified B Corp, how can we make it something that is ethical, something that's sustainable, something that's inclusive and accessible as well? As far as the future goes right now, we've been able to grow our business really sustainably. So we don't take any outside funding or anything like that. We're 100% bootstrapped and always have been. We've been profitable since day one. And we really want to grow in a sustainable way. Do what a lot of the tech industry does. They push you to grow bigger, faster, consistently, just growth, 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 growth at all cost. And so
Right.
we love it when the numbers go up, but we're not going to, kill ourselves to do it. It's more important to us to have happy clients and happy lives. So as far as the future, people ask us sometimes, what is our sort of like, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? Our 5-year plan and 10-year plan is to be happy at work and have a good work-life balance and, have a great work culture, enjoy working with all of our customers, and then build products with our customers that are actually going to be sustainable in the marketplace, that are going to go places, that are going to be profitable, that are going to help them grow. Because one of the things that we see as our responsibility is building products that can help people be economically successful.
I love that. Love that. Great mantra, right? Great mission. So, and I'm guessing your culture and your values align to all that. So I know you do product strategy, right? But you do some AI strategy. Tell our audience, since that's definitely something seeing a lot of and people are very curious about. Tell us how you approach that, and because everyone's different right now.
Yeah. So, one thing that we're seeing a lot right now is that people and our clients are being told, you've got to integrate AI. You must have AI in this product.
Yeah.
Our approach to it, because we do AI strategy, what we're doing is we're helping people to figure out how they can use AI in these products to be successful. And because you're getting all of this top-down pressure to just use AI, no matter the cost, like just figure it out, just come up with a way to use the AI in your product. But it's not really aligned with the way that we approach things, right? So the way that we approach it is, what is the problem space? What problem are we trying to solve? And then how do we solve it, right? So it's the what and the why and then the how. And sometimes that is AI and sometimes it's not AI, right? But we
Right.
always start with, what are we actually trying to do here? And something that we see really frequently is that founders, and particularly in the startup space, are getting a lot of pressure right now to just add AI. And so we'll kind of ask, well, what kind of were you thinking here? Or what are people saying to you? And so it's a lot of chatbots. And what we have found is that chatbots are not always the most effective way to use AI. So to give you an example, we worked on a tax app once. And so they said, we want to add a chatbot. Well, they already had 2 chatbots in the system. So we do
Right.
really need another one. And so how can we use AI more effectively than having another chatbot for somebody to say, like, when are my taxes due? On the flip side of that, they're sitting on a ton of data, right? And so how can we use that data to make recommendations or that are really effective for these customers, as opposed to just getting into another chatbot? The other thing is that we want to make sure that we are recommending AI tools that are going to be really beneficial and helpful, but also ethical and sustainable. So we talked to someone in the mental health space just this week, actually, and she was getting a lot of pressure to put a chatbot for therapy. And we know that chatbots for therapy can be really problematic and can, cause people to want to self-harm. And so we need to be really careful about that and think about the ethics around that and said, okay, how might we use AI in a more effective way in an app like this? And maybe that looks more like content moderation, right?
Right.
She has a lot of content in her app. And so how might we use that in a way to flag content that is like pointing towards self-harm or things like that and saying, okay, this is something that we need to take a closer look at, as opposed to just adding in another chatbot. So a lot of what we're doing is trying to find the most effective way to use AI. But before we even get there, finding out if AI is really what we want to use.
Right. Right. And that should be the approach. What we always say, on the podcast here is that you really need to think about your use cases, and
Yeah.
each use case is differently. The AI can be the how. And I think that you're right. The downward pressure from the board level and the founder level is, and the investor level, right, is we need to integrate AI in some way, shape, or form. Well, that means different things. If you're talking about your product, right, and you want it to be AI centric, that's a different thing than if you're trying to find high impact, move the needle use cases internally, right? Like you're talking about. And I think that there's different metrics and different evaluation criteria you need to be thinking about when you're just saying use AI to use AI. That's not the right approach. And it's really, what are you trying to solve? So I agree with you. Yeah. So my logical next question, right, is obviously tell me about the industry in general, right, as you're seeing it, and just tell me how the impacts that you're seeing when it comes to emerging tech like AI or data and automation.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, I've been in the tech industry for a while now, and I've kind of seen the hype cycles come and go. If you've ever seen, there's a really great model of this. It's called the Gartner hype cycle, and it goes up and it says, you've got this peak level, and then it goes all the way. You have it's called the trough of disillusionment, and then you kind of
Yes.
come back again after you go all the way up and all the way back down. Then we sort of level out. And
Yep.
I'm hopeful that we are getting more leveled out in the AI space because, like I said, I've seen it all. Like we've been through Web3 and crypto and NFTs and all of it.
Mobile, websites,
Web,
cloud, right. You
all of
could,
it.
yeah.
We've been through all of it. And so, I think that we're still a bit in the hype cycle on a lot of the AI work. So I went to a session just a few weeks ago, and it was so funny because so somebody got up in front of this entire session and said, we're not going to need developers or UX designers anymore. You can just do it on your own by vibe coding. And then proceeded to show some kind of terrible apps that have been vibe coded. So I said, so I was talking to someone about it later, and I said, that great Mark Twain quote, right? The news of my death has been greatly exaggerated.
Yes.
So I actually went in shortly after that. I went in and I had been working with a client and asked its permission if it was okay if I used some non-proprietary information and I just fed it into a vibe coding, app. He said, yeah, that's fine. And I compared the designs that we did with what came out of this vibe coding platform. And I showed it to him and he said, wow, that's like night and day because
Right.
it didn't have the functionality that it needed. It was missing some sort of critical stuff that was contextual for the user. So marketplace, I think that we are kind of in a hype cycle right now. You're also seeing things from the development perspective where sure we're able to build some really cool code right now, but it's full of bugs. There's like a lot of tech debt in it. There are security flaws. So we are going to have to come back and fix a lot of those things, right? So
Yep.
we've had plenty of clients who've come to us and said, I really tried to build this out with AI and I realized that the user experience is just not there with it because there's such a psychological component and a contextual component and it's really specialized work. So we've got people who come back to us and say, we need you to fix this. So we're able to kind of fix some of these things that happen. But it's tough right now because I think that it's creating a situation where it's harder for really young people to get into the tech industry. So us old people like me, we're, we're doing just fine. And we're doing a lot of very specialized work. We're very senior level. We're good. But I think it's really hard right now for young people who are trying to get into it. And, people are able to write junior level code with AI. And like,
Right.
but when I think about that, I think about how are we going to train the next generation? Because you can't just throw AI generated code into the world and call it a day. I mean, you're going to have someone who can analyze what's coming out of the AI and make sure that it meets your code quality standards and that it is not full of bugs. And, somebody's going to have to manage that code from a human perspective, no matter what. Somebody needs to know that the code coming out of there is good quality code. So how do we train our next generation if they're not able to get jobs right now? So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's a tricky part, but I do think that we'll kind of level out and be able to. I'm hopeful that we will be able to get to that sort of productivity level.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the junior level developers and the kids just coming out of college have it much harder. And I think that the only way to chart that career path is to understand how to use AI as their co-pilot, right?
Yeah.
And it's the whole reason that term came about, right? And I think that if they can do that and demonstrate that they can solve some of the problems that you're talking about, right, is code quality and security. And if they can learn that, they could educate themselves faster. So that's kind of always been my recommendation talking to the young generation coming up, is that you have to navigate that and figure out how to make it a strength rather than a weakness. And you just can't say, hey, I'm going to be this coder, because if 30% right now they're saying of code is written by AI, right? That's only going to go up. But you have to have, to your point, the human in the loop. It's not just going to take over. It's why we call them digital coworkers. They need to have a human using the AI and not the AI replacing the human. That's the way we kind of point it on the podcast.
Yeah, but I think that there is kind of getting back into the hype cycle. I do think that there's a lot of sort of top down pressure to literally replace people, and I think that some of that is just the, not to get overly philosophical here, but I think a lot of that is that sort of push and pull in capitalism to decrease
Yeah.
our labor prices, while at the same time you've got workers who are like, "Hey, I need to
Right.
get by in this system." So I think there's a little bit of that push and pull tug of war going on right now, where I do think that people at the board level and higher want to literally replace developers. But to your point, if younger developers can learn to work with these tools but still be able to write and understand code, I think that's the most important thing. I mean, it's like the classic way to sort of work through your development career is, getting into QA is such a good way to do it, because you get in QA and you see where everything's broken, and then
Yep.
you dramatically better at writing code yourself. So just kind of getting back into that mindset of understanding what does this code that's coming out of this do? What does the quality look like? Where are we creating tech debt, and having a really well-rounded understanding of that. And that's why I say some of us people who are more senior level, we're going to be okay. I think it is so difficult right now for the younger folks though. But if they can work with it, I think it's going to be really much more effective.
Yeah, I think that the only way for them to be effective going forward is to figure out how to use it to their advantage, right? And just, again, kind of carve a niche out of using it and doing it in the right way, like you talked about. So last question before I ask you my magic wand question, which I ask everybody, but tell me a little bit as you look down the road, right? I don't think anybody can look past 18 months. I think it's just, there's too much change happening. What do you see as the biggest impact as the hype cycle comes down and levels out, right? Because I think there's so many, again, we're glass half full here on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
It's always about how do we make the world better using AI and not worry about the fears as much. We'll leave that to the security experts and all that. But how do we use it to our advantage? And because one of the things that, I wrote an article recently about AI is not IT, right? And that's the difference, because now you can move it outside of tech, and tech doesn't have to be burdened to fix everything within the company, right? When you need an HR system, right? Tech doesn't have to go build that and build all the integrations. They can actually get freed up to solve some of the big problems like that you guys are doing, which is let's build sustainable, profitable platforms and systems, right, with technology. So how do you see it?
Okay, so how do I see
The next 18 months in the industry, right? And maybe beyond, but it's hard to, because we don't know how fast some of this is going to evolve.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard, right? Because everybody wants to do prediction because I think that humans are naturally very uncomfortable with not having control over the future. Again, not to get
Yeah.
too philosophical here, but I think
No, but you're right.
yeah, we're all sort of uncomfortable with this idea that the future is totally random. You really do not know what's going to happen from day to day. And even getting back into the AI space, there's a lot of pressure to create predictive AI models. And we really haven't seen those work really well because, past the what has happened in the past is not necessarily a good predictor of what has happened is going to happen in the future, even though we would really, really like for it to be, you know.
Right.
And so for me, what does the next 18 months look like? I don't know. For me, I have always in my career just sort of been along for the ride and we kind of take what we can and go with it. One of the things that we do in Lunar Lab is that we have about 10 million contingency plans for literally every scenario under the sun. So I think
I like that, by the way.
part of it for us is that we're not necessarily trying to predict the future, but we are kind of looking at lots of different outcomes and trying to understand how we will approach those outcomes. So my co-founder and I, we're both very anxious people. So I think in some ways we're like the worst two people to found a business together, but also the best two because, we're typically very ready when things come around the corner because we are always so future facing. So it was kind of a lot of rambling to say that know what it's going to bring. I'm hopeful that we can sort of even out. I know that right now is a really rocky time in the tech industry. I think that people have not acknowledged how big of an impact things like the Silicon Valley bank failure had on the tech
Hmm.
industry. It was not a thing that any of us saw coming. Another thing that I talk about a lot is the R&D tax deduction, Section 174, which not a ton of people know about, right? Like it's a very obscure part of the tax code. But what it means is that previously, before 3 years ago, companies could deduct 100% of their R&D expenses, which is any kind of software development. Now they can't. They have to amortize it over 5 years. So, you've got that. You've got Silicon Valley Bank. You've got tariffs are having a big impact on the tech industry in a way that I think people don't realize right now. So we've kind of got a lot of things coming at us right now that no one could have predicted before. I'm hopeful that that things will get a little bit better, but I'm also prepared if they don't. We've got
Yeah. Hope for
1,000
the best, plan for the worst, right?
yeah, we've got the 10,000 contingency plan. So,
Yeah.
no, we're kind of ready. I would really like to see some of the hype cycles around AI kind of even out. And I would like people to understand a little bit more about what AI is capable of and what it is not capable of. Cause I think that a lot of people have this very rosy picture of AI as this magical machine and it can do everything for me. And that's, you know,
Yeah.
it's not right.
Yeah, and what I really hope, I think you're going to see this trend. At least this is again to your point. None of us can predict, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I keep thinking about is that every company kind of needs their own internal AI brain that knows about that company, which I call them small language models, right? And I feel like that needs to be a trend because again, the old saying in anything, garbage in, garbage out, right? There's so much garbage on the internet. The LLMs, a lot of times it's why they hallucinate. And for us to be able to teach the AI a model about a specific business, I think that's what you're going to start to see is that trend of how do I build a small language model around my company and all the things that it knows about it, right? Yeah.
I've often thought that it would be really nice to have sort of walled gardens
Yes.
with AI that we can kind of put in a lot of our information and what we can do, particularly in the generative AI space. I have found that it can be useful and helpful. Now, I will say that a lot of people use it for things like, marketing materials, and sales materials, which fine. Personally, I have not seen it be very effective because I know that it can be very generic coming out of there. And
Hmm.
our sort of philosophy around sales and marketing here is that it should be, we're communicating with humans about a
Mhm.
problem that we can solve for humans. So we want to communicate with human language.
Yeah.
I would like to see some of that walled garden and ways that we can use it in a little bit more effective ways than, um, trying to get people to use our products and services, because I think that there are ways to elevate ourselves operationally and be faster and more effective without kind of getting into the marketing side or content creation piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. And again, great feedback, Elizabeth. It's some of the things that we do on the podcast is take ideas like that and
Mhm.
we build specific things for specific use cases, right? In and around that. And the whole reason is to help companies like yours and others in the mid-market space just serve more people in a better and higher way, right? And
Mhm.
my philosophy on AI is that you really need to not just the use case we talked about, but what can take the mundane tasks away that you can trust, right, day to day. And it's not, you're right, it's not always the marketing material, right? Because sometimes that's your secret sauce on how you brand things or how you portray things. Sometimes it's just getting that rough draft of getting you 80% of the way there, and then you take it from there. Something, right? There's all kinds of things, but I do think the thing that's most neglected within companies, and I see it in my own clients, is the internal processes that are so inefficient that can be easily solved to free up their people to use their human capital in a much better way. And that's the one that frustrates me the most.
Yeah, yeah. So with our consulting work, as you can imagine, we see a lot of very messy
Yeah.
companies going
Oh God, yeah. You see the warts and all, right?
on when you get in there. And a lot of that translates. There's one of those laws about this, and I can't remember the name of it right now, where it's, your internal company disorganization will show up in your software.
A
Like it
hundred
will
percent.
come. And
100%.
And we do see a lot of these situations where companies are just not very effective internally. So we end up doing, even though this is not one of our core services, we end up doing a lot of business process consulting of like, how can we make this more effective? And we do see a lot of opportunities within companies for automation where they're doing everything manually, and moving things around. And it doesn't have to be something huge. It could even just be something as simple as, when we get a new form and we need an automated email to go out to someone to
Right.
know that we've received.
That should be an easy thing to do, right? And you might think you asked for, like rocket science in some of these companies, right? Again, some of my clients, I see it, them trying to find like RFP documents on SharePoint. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like this should take you 3 seconds with an AI enabled thing. Like that's the stuff that's frustrating.
Yes, I think it's really interesting that you brought up search
Yeah.
specifically. One of the things we have to be really good at understanding how users are using stuff in context and how
Mhm.
different demographics of people use stuff. And we are seeing younger users, they like really do not like or sometimes even understand like folder structures, but they
Right.
search for everything. So because they've grown up with search, being able
Yeah.
to
Google's, yeah. Right. And yes.
aren't using search right now. And so they've got stuff all over. So they've got it scattered all over and they're not necessarily searching for it or using AI to go out and find it and things like that. But yeah, like I said, it's funny. It's funny the way that people are not using these automations now within our company. We run a tight ship over here. Like we are operationally sound like within an inch of our lives over here. So
Mm.
like every quarter we do a meeting where we sit down and we say, okay, what can we make smoother operationally? And like we really dig and try to find something. And it's very rare that we actually have something that we can do. But because of that, it means that we see a lot of kind of problems in the world. And I think a lot of
Mhm.
them can be solved through automation and AI. But I think where the problem is and why that doesn't happen is because they don't sit down like we do every quarter and say, okay, what is hard? Like what's
Yeah.
to do that we have to do all the time and it just takes too long and like we're just messing around with it. Like what can we do? And I think that's kind of the trick is like sitting down and saying, where are the problem spots? Where is stuff falling through the cracks consistently? And like this is what we need. The other thing is I think that can help is mapping it out and saying, okay, here's this process that I've got and literally doing almost like a journey map and saying,
Absolutely.
do step 3, step 4, And then going through there and saying, okay, this is where the friction spot, we get bottlenecked right here. Like, what can we do about this? And like I
Right.
said, it doesn't necessarily have to be apply AI right here, but it can be apply AI right here,
It
but
could
it
be
can
an automation step.
not
Right.
automated. So I think there are lots of ways to approach it, but the first step of dealing with that is literally sitting down and finding the trouble spot.
Yeah. Totally agreed. All right. Last question, which is, well, I love everything you've been sharing with me. I could talk to you about this for a long time. Magic wand question. If you could fix one thing within Lunar Lab, right, with AI, what would that be?
Man, this is like such a hard question. Well, and I think it's hard for me because, like I said, we do sit down on a quarterly basis and we look and we find all the problems and we surgically fix any problems all the time. In fact, one of the things that we say all the time is that, I wish somebody would come in and just like find every problem spot in our business and tell us what it is. Like, because we're always worried about blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
We do ask ourselves that on a quarterly, when we do our quarterly meeting, we say, like, what are our blind spots? And like, that's such a hard question, but we still ask ourselves. So I think it's tough. Internally, we're doing, like I said, we run a pretty tight ship over here. So like we zip through stuff pretty quick. I think that something that's challenging for us in sort of the AI space right now is really around the misinformation of AI and this idea that, we don't necessarily need UX design strategy or product strategy because we can have ChatGPT do it for us. And that is really not the case.
Yeah.
I have fixed enough apps that have been done through vibe coding or ChatGPT or whatever to know that that's not the way. So I think
It's not the way. You're right.
yeah, I think there's a client education piece that if I could wave a magic wand and I could have some system to help me with better client education, because of course we do all of our meetings, we produce content, we talk about this all the time. I mean, just constantly talking about it. But we're battling the hype cycle and, there's a lot of optimism, which is great to have. And it's a lot of dreaming about how we can get, how do we get people want expert level results without paying expert level prices.
Yeah.
And the client education of helping people understand that you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
I think if we could wave a magic wand at that, I would love it.
Yeah. Totally agreed. Totally. I love that. No, this is great. Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing. Your insights been great. Really looking forward to getting this podcast live. But and we'll have all the links in the show notes, but tell everybody how to get in touch with you guys.
Yes. So our website is www.lunarlab.io, LUNARLAB.io. We're online. You can go through our contact form to get to us. We would love to talk to anybody. We do lots of pro bono mentoring. So if anybody ever just wants to like chat or say, hey, I've got this app, I don't know what to do with it, literally call us and we will just talk to you for free. It's part of our benefit corporation goals is to kind of help businesses grow and volunteer in that way. Of course, we're always online. You can find us there. Social media is great. LinkedIn. Please follow us on LinkedIn. We love LinkedIn growth. That is such a great lead gen channel. So please follow us on LinkedIn.
Love it. Love it. Thank you again, Elizabeth. We will absolutely be following Lunar Lab. No doubt about it. And that wraps up this episode of Future Proof. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.
If you're ready to embrace change and lead with innovation, be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Future Proof Podcast.